The crackling fire mirrored the intensity in the women's eyes as they sat in a tight circle. For generations, men had led the village, but tonight, change was in the air. "Our daughters deserve more. The elder, Mama Obele," said her voice unwavering. The women murmured in agreement, nodding as they recalled years of being unheard. A young woman, Abeni, stood up. "If we do not fight for ourselves, who will?" The village had faced hardships, famine, raids, and the neglect of male leaders. The women had worked the fields, raised the children, and kept the village alive. Now, they were ready to reclaim their power. The village square buzzed with activity until Abeni stepped forward. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "It is time for women to lead." Gasps rippled through the crowd, the men exchanging glances of shock and amusement. "You have ruled for years, and where has it brought us?" She continued, her chin high. Behind her, the women stood tall, their presence a silent declaration. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some men sneered, but others listened. Mama Obela nodded in approval from the sidelines, the fire of revolution in her aged eyes. A challenge had been issued, and the village would never be the same. The chief's hut was quiet, the air thick with tension. Abeni met the old man's gaze, unflinching. "We demand a seat at the council." The chief sighed, rubbing his temples. "Women do not rule, Abeni." Mama Obele leaned forward. "Then perhaps it is time that changed." The flickering lantern cast long shadows on the mud brick walls, the weight of history pressing upon them. "You underestimate us," Abeni said softly. Yet her voice carried strength. The chief's lips tightened, but he did not dismiss them outright. For the first time, he was forced to consider a world where women ruled. Under the moon's glow, the women moved as one, their staffs striking the air. "Strength is not just of the body, but of the mind," Abeni called out. For too long, they had relied on others for protection. Now, they would protect themselves. Mama Obele's heart swelled with pride as she watched the young women transform. The village men had laughed at their training, but soon they would understand. Abeni spun her staff, her movements fluid, precise. She was born for this. Each night, more women joined, the whispers of revolution growing louder. Change was no longer a distant dream. It was happening before their eyes. The sun rose on a village forever changed. The air was thick with anticipation as the chief stood before his people. Abeni, dressed in the colors of leadership, held her head high. "Today, we recognize the strength of our women." The chief's voice carried over the crowd. A murmur spread through the villagers, some in awe, others in disbelief. "From this day forth, women will have a place in our council, in our defense, in our future." Now. Mama Obela smiled, tears glistening in her wise eyes. Abeni took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. The fire crackled as the women huddled closer, their faces illuminated by its glow. Abeni's voice was steady. "Our fight is not over. This is just the beginning." Whispers of agreement spread through the group. Each woman knew what was at stake. "The council has accepted us, but not everyone believes in our strength," Mama Obela warned. Abeni clenched her fists. "Then we will show them." The wind carried the scent of burning wood and resolve. Change was in the air. A young woman, barely past girlhood, stepped forward. "Teach us, and we will follow." That night, under the watchful eyes of the stars, a revolution was forged. The first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. The women stood in disciplined rows, spears in hand, their eyes focused ahead. Abeni moved among them, correcting stances, whispering words of encouragement. Mama Obela watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. The men of the village had doubted them, but soon there would be no more doubt. An arrow flew through the air, Hitting its mark with precision, cheers erupted. Each woman had a reason to fight, and that reason burned brightly within them. They were no longer just daughters and wives. They were warriors. The village elders sat in silence, their eyes locked on Abeni. "You gave us a seat at the council, but still our voices are ignored," she declared. Murmurs spread through the crowd, some in agreement, others in resistance. One man scoffed, "Women are meant to advise, not to lead." Mama Obele's laugh was sharp. "Then you have underestimated us." Abeni's gaze never wavered. "We do not seek permission. We take our place." For the first time, some of the men shifted uncomfortably, realizing change was inevitable. A decision loomed over the village, a battle not of weapons, but of will. The marketplace fell silent as the men stepped into Abeni's path. The eldest among them sneered, "You disrupt the balance of our ways." Abeni's grip on her staff tightened. "Your ways have failed us." The women behind her stood strong, their eyes unyielding. A crowd gathered, waiting to see who would bend first. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Father, why are you afraid of them?" Abeni caught the father's eyes, saw the doubt flicker there. The tide of power was shifting, slowly but surely. The fire burned high, casting golden light on the faces of the villagers. Laughter and song filled the air, a melody of unity and change. Abeni stood, lifting her cup. "Tonight, we honor a new beginning." The village erupted in cheers, the old barriers slowly crumbling. Men and women sat side by side, not in conflict, but in shared purpose. Mama Obele's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You have done well, my child." Abeni's heart swelled. This was not just her victory, it belonged to them all. Under the vast African sky, the Lionesses had risen. The torches flickered, casting shadows on the council's weathered faces. Abeni stood tall. "The world is changing, and so must we." A few elders exchanged wary glances, their silence louder than words. Mama Obele's gaze met Abeni's, her eyes filled with quiet encouragement. One elder leaned forward. "You have proven your strength, but can you lead?" Abeni's hands tightened at her sides. "We already are." The murmurs grew louder, resistance and support colliding in the air. Tonight, the future of the village hung in the balance. The golden light of dawn bathed the fields in warmth. For the first time, women and men worked together as equals. Abeni wiped the sweat from her brow, feeling the weight of history shift. A young boy tugged on her dress, handing her a bundle of millet. "Will you teach me?" She knelt beside him, her heart swelling. "We will teach each other." Mama Obele watched from a distance, pride shining in her wise eyes. The land thrived under many hands, no longer divided by old customs. A new season had begun, not just for the crops, but for the village itself. The village gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree, anticipation thick in the air. Abeni stood before the council, her heart steady despite the weight of the moment. The eldest woman of the village stepped forward, holding a carved staff of authority. "Today, we recognize what has always been true. You are a leader," she declared. Abeni bowed her head as the staff was placed in her hands, the wood warm from years of history. Mama Obele clapped first, and soon the village erupted in cheers. For the first time, leadership belonged not to one gender, but to the strength of all. Abeni looked over the crowd, knowing this was only the beginning. The sky blazed with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Abeni exhaled, the weight of leadership settling over her shoulders. Mama Obele sat beside her, silent but understanding. "Did you ever doubt?" Abeni asked, glancing at the older woman. Mama Obele chuckled. "Only that you would take so long to see your own power." Abeni laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. For all the battles fought, for all the traditions challenged, this was home. And home had never felt so full of possibility. The drums echoed into the night, a rhythm of triumph and unity. Men and women danced together, no longer divided by old ways. Children laughed, spinning in circles, their future brighter than ever before. Abeni moved through the crowd, her heart full as she took in the sight. Mama Obela watched from afar, nodding in approval, knowing the village was in good hands. A young girl tugged on Abeni's sleeve. "One day, I will lead too." Abeni knelt, touching the girl's cheek. "Yes, and you will lead even greater things." The lionesses had risen, and their roar would never fade.